Bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Asala Abbas et je suis accompagnée aujourd'hui de Acacia Caniche Pieris, Alexandru Stroh et Caitlin Budram. Nous sommes ici en tant qu'équipe de mise en œuvre d'Emploi et de Développement social Canada, chargée de proposer une approche pragmatique et éthique pour la mise en œuvre des directives sur le retour au bureau et l'utilisation des médias sociaux au sein du ministère. EDSC joue un rôle essentiel dans la prestation de services à plus de 16 millions de Canadiens. Assurer une transition fluide vers le travail en présentiel, tout en maintenant des normes professionnelles élevées sur les médias sociaux, est crucial pour préserver la confiance du public. Cependant, il ne s'agit pas seulement de conformité aux politiques ou de logistique organisationnelle. Au cœur de cette réflexion se trouve la nécessité de préserver l'intégrité, l'efficacité et la perception publique de EDSC en tant qu'institution de confiance. Notre analyse met en évidence l'interdépendance étroite entre les obligations liées au milieu de travail et les risques posés par une utilisation inappropriée des médias sociaux au sein de EDSC. Si ces enjeux ne sont pas abordés, ils pourraient perturber la prestation des services, soulever des préoccupations éthiques et nuire à la confiance du public envers notre ministère. Aujourd'hui, nous vous présenterons une approche de bon sens, stratégique pour la gestion du retour au bureau et de l'utilisation des médias sociaux, en explorant les options possibles, les risques et les recommandations qui placent au premier plan la qualité des services, l'engagement des employés et la confiance du public. Next slide, please. Before we dive in, I'd like to give you a quick overview of what we'll be covering. So first, we'll start with the background outlining the current challenges surrounding return to office compliance and social media governance at ESDC. Next, we'll present our problem statement, identifying the key risks and concerns that need to be addressed. From there, we'll move into our solution proposal, where we'll walk you through the various implementation options, assess their risks and benefits, and explain why we ultimately recommend a hybrid model for RTO and strict enforcement for social media policy. Finally, we'll discuss the next steps, outlining the phased rollout, key milestones, and how we can ensure a smooth transition moving forward. With that, let's begin by setting the stage with some context on the issue. Next slide, please.
Thank you. So clearly there's a problem with our return to work policy. It's been in action for a while now, but currently we have very low adherence, including in the ESTC, with over 25% of government workers not adhering to the RTO directive. Many of these workers, including employment and training advisors, feel like returning to the office is unnecessary and done to improve the federal government's perception among civilians. However, local officials disagree. To quote them, they believe that when these federal employment and training advisors are present online, they often require more time to understand local conditions and the needs of the people who live there. Time that was usually not invested, given divided attention on other files. In other words, by being online, valuable time is being wasted, something that wouldn't be happening if people were in person and on the ground. Furthermore, many local officials and businesses find it difficult to implement federal initiatives without the presence of employment and training advisors. A lot of these workers are now taking to social media to express their opposition to RTO directives during both personal time and working hours. This represents a massive ethical issue. People's faith in the ESDC could be undercut. How can the public trust the ministry and the federal government if its own workers are publicly opposing its policies? This is particularly damaging considering that there is a federal election coming up this year. Before we address the problem, we have some key considerations we believed were imperative to this case. Next slide, please. So just to give you a lay of the land, if the people don't trust the ministry, then the ministry is unable to perform its job. So some key considerations regarding this problem is service delivery, public perception, employee satisfaction, and union relations, and fostering an ethical workplace. So at the ESDC, we aim to provide Canadians with high-quality services, but challenges arise from policies like the return to office and social media guidelines. These can impact employee well-being, work-life balance, and morale, potentially leading to dissatisfaction. If concerns are ignored, it may fuel union resistance and online discussions, damaging public perception of our institution. Balancing organizational objectives with employee needs during union negotiations is essential for morale, retention, and engagement. Upholding public service values like neutrality and integrity ensures an ethical workplace, fostering trust and a positive environment for both employees and the citizens we serve. Next slide, please.
This is all to say that an analysis of the context and key considerations for the ESDC has led us to determine that this is the problem we need to fix. The TBS return to office mandate has faced significant resistance from public servants who are openly expressing their dissatisfaction on social media. ESDC Canada has observed that there is a clear correlation between the government's push for in-office work and the rise in negative sentiment online, highlighting the need for clearer social media guidelines to address and mitigate these concerns. The lack of compliance with the RTO mandate and unregulated social media discourse are disrupting workforce morale, increasing misinformation, and ultimately hindering the ESDC's ability to deliver effective public services. Next slide, please. So now that we've outlined the challenges, let's take a look at the possible approaches to implementing RTO directives at the ESDC. Our first option is a strict enforcement with discipline. This approach mandates in-office attendance for at least 3 days a week, with compliance monitored through turnstiles, IP logins, and attendance reports. Employees who do not comply would face progressive discipline, including warnings and potential termination. While this approach would ensure full compliance and align with the Treasury Board's directives, it comes at a significant cost: lower morale, increased union resistance, and potential talent loss, all of which could negatively impact service delivery. The second option we considered was maintaining the status quo. This approach would keep things as they are, allowing employees to continue their current hybrid work arrangements with no additional enforcements. While this avoids immediate resistance and maintains employee satisfaction, it fails to address ongoing compliance issues. Current in-office attendance remains below 60%, and without action, service delivery and workplace cohesion may continue to decline. Next slide, please. So we chose the third option, which implements a flexible schedule requiring employees to be in office from 2 to 4 days per week, which is based on operational need and on job function. What this means is that rather than requiring all workers to have a hybrid agreement, the policy takes into account that there are different jobs that require being in person more than others. For example, in the case of employment and training advisors at the ESDC, due to the nature of their work changing, the complaints we've received from local officials and businesses, and due to advisors needing to work long hours, often with overtime on short notice, their jobs require to be in person more than others. This would limit the complaints made by unions, ESDC employees, and by government workers at large that the government is forcing them back to work unnecessarily, maintaining employee morale. Furthermore, as not all ESDC workers require a hybrid arrangement and can remain virtual, the issues many workers are facing in regards to limited office space would be mitigated. Another aspect to this policy is that there will be a gradual rollout of this policy, prioritizing roles that require more fieldwork or understanding of local conditions. While this would benefit workers and managers by easing workers back into an in-person environment, it also allows us ample time to consult with unions, to form new arrangements, and to ensure a balance between employee morale and public satisfaction. Regardless of our RTO approach, however, we recommend a common-sense social media plan that reinforces existing guidelines while expanding them to address modern challenges, which we will explore next. Next slide, please.
Okay, so building off of our hybrid model, our approach will bring clarity to the issue of social media use by ESDC officials. We have identified a policy gap whereby social media rules fall under broader electronic network policies. The Code of Conduct identifies unacceptable network use activities, such as using the network for political activity and making inappropriate criticisms of government policy. Our edition will find that engagement with posts that are critical or undermining of the government, likes, tweets, reposts, is also unacceptable. bringing us in line with other similar public service social media use frameworks around the world. For example, the Australian Public Services Social Media Guidance establishes low-risk activities, such as social debate or joining an online community, and high-risk activities, such as establishing a community that is critical of your policy area, airing significant workplace grievances online, or endorsing, liking, and reposting content that defames individuals. In order to maintain public service integrity and impartiality, and based on the problem of workplace grievances already being aired online on websites like Reddit while at work, we wish to reinforce the existing policy and restrict specific sites on work devices, with targeted exemptions for communications teams that need to use these social media outlets. Next, we'll turn to an analysis of the risks involved with our strategies. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please.
The ESDC must carefully consider different approaches to implementing return to office policies, each with its own set of risks and benefits. The primary reason why we selected the third option is because we ran it through a risk matrix and we want to see which option had the least risk. So option 3 is a phased hybrid option, which is role specific. It's a more flexible solution with a lower risk of cross-service delivery, public perception, and employee satisfaction. This option can help address specific concerns without broad disruption, balancing ethical standards while maintaining employee engagement. So why the hybrid model is the best path forward? So neither option 1 nor option 2 fully address the ESDC's priorities of service delivery, employee wellness, workplace ethics, and public perception. Strict enforcement may achieve compliance, but risk alienating employees, harming retention, and decreasing labor disputes are often too risky. Doing nothing fails to resolve compliance issues, leading to continued inefficiencies. The hybrid model strikes a balance, ensuring structure and accountability while respecting workforce concerns. Next slide, please.
Okay, so within our implementation timeline, which we see here, we want to begin to identify priority in-office roles and reinforce social media guidelines within the month to ensure service delivery remains consistent and ethical. We will use education-first enforcement, aiming to prevent engagement with unacceptable posts. By March, we will communicate the RTO timeline and policy changes to employees to ensure ESDC employees and ESDC in general stays informed. By August, we will implement our hybrid model and device monitoring. Practical monitoring will involve keyword highlights that track unacceptable posts over the network. By September, we will be ready for a more complete rollout, and in order for our changes to maintain cohesion, we will consult with unions and provide transition support to those with long commutes and family needs. Going further into the future, we will monitor compliance and adjust policies to ensure that they are working for ESDC. We will continue to review and improve the scope of the proposed policies going forward from there. Next slide, please.
Thank you. A successful communication strategy is critical to the effective rollout of both return to office and social media directives. As the implementation team, we recognize that how these policies are communicated will directly impact service delivery, employee understanding, compliance, and overall morale. Our approach ensures that messaging is clear, consistent, and aligned with ESDC's values. Just as millions of Canadians are affected by these policies, thousands of employees are as well. The government will communicate to the employees that this is a phased and transparent plan. Our communication plan will evolve alongside the rollout, ensuring that employees understand not just the rules, but the rationale behind them. What we say to employees is just as important as how we say it. Our communication strategy will focus on 3 key messages. First, this is a common sense approach, not an overreach. So we will reinforce that these policies are not about punishment or control, but about maintaining professionalism and public trust. Public servants, just like private sector employees, are expected to uphold professional standards in both their in-office presence and their online behavior. Number two, that we are balancing fairness with operational needs. So for RTO, this means acknowledging employee concerns while ensuring service delivery remains efficient. For social media, this means setting clear guidelines that protect employees while also safeguarding the neutrality of the public service. And number three, that professionalism matters. Our actions shape public trust. Employees will need to understand that how they engage online, whether posting, sharing, or even liking content, can impact public confidence in our government institutions. With regards to what the government's messaging will be towards unions, we will acknowledge that as we approach the expiration of the collective bargaining agreement on June 6th, the government remains committed to negotiating in good faith with unions on key issues, including remote work arrangements. The government will also acknowledge the union's concerns regarding flexibility for employees with caregiving responsibilities or health considerations, and understand the importance of ensuring that workers are not penalized for seeking reasonable accommodations. The government is open to discussing a gradual transition to in-office work, recognizing that employees hired during the pandemic may have adapted to new work-life balances. The government will also need to recognize the increasing need for mental health support, as well as well-being programs to ease the transition. The government's ultimate goal is to balance operational needs with employee well-being, ensuring a fair and sustainable hybrid work model that supports both service delivery and workforce morale. And finally, public perception is vital to ESDC's ability to deliver services. As such, statements to the media will focus on ensuring uninterrupted service delivery to millions of Canadians. Once again, the government will affirm that they are committed to good faith negotiations with unions while ensuring that essential services remain stable. Misinterpretations or misinformation can escalate tensions, so the government's focus is on clear, direct communication and a balanced, long-term hybrid work model that works for both employees and the public. By maintaining open dialogue and a cooperative approach, we aim to resolve this transition fairly and efficiently without unnecessary conflict or disruption. Next slide, please. Okay, so to recap, for ESTC to succeed, we need to address two key challenges: compliance with the RTO mandate and ethical social media use. Right now, there's significant resistance to in-office work, with public servants expressing their dissatisfaction online. This not only fuels negative public perception, but also risks service disruption that impacts millions of Canadians. Our proposed solution is a balanced hybrid model requiring 2 to 4 days in office based on role-specific needs, with a phased implementation to ease the transition. Alongside this, there will be a common sense social media policy, which will ensure responsible online engagement without escalating tensions. By taking a practical, structured approach, we can support both employees and the Canadians who rely on our services. Next slide, please. En conclusion, une approche visionnaire est essentielle pour aborder les défis en constante évolution des politiques gouvernementales, notamment à la lumière des avancées technologiques. Étant donné que le rapport Tate a été rédigé avant l'ère de l'Internet, il est crucial que le gouvernement envisage de constituer un groupe de travail pour réévaluer ses recommandations. Cela s'agit d'une problématique d'envergure nationale ayant des implications à travers tout le Canada. Tout en restant fermement attaché à la protection de la liberté d'expression, comme le souligne l'affaire Fraser, le gouvernement reconnaît que les fonctionnaires occupent un rôle unique au sein de la société canadienne, où la neutralité de leurs fonctions est essentielle à la préservation de la démocratie. En mettant en œuvre le mandat retourné au bureau, nous sommes convaincus que les employés seront rappelés de leurs responsabilités éthiques et les codes de conduite qu'ils doivent respecter en tant que fonctionnaires. ce qui contribuera à encadrer l'utilisation acceptable des médias sociaux et à renforcer l'intégrité du service public. Merci, thank you. We appreciate your time and we're open to questions.
Je voulais remercier votre équipe pour la présentation et tout le travail fourni. Évidemment que vous avez déployé beaucoup d'efforts. Merci beaucoup. I wasn't sure how much French there would be, so I had a couple of French questions, but I'll let my colleagues either ask in French or English. And it's wonderful to see how much great work you did as a team in such a short period of time. So I thank you very, very much for that. I'm going to pass it over to Guy Giorno to start.
Merci Noah. Je dois poser ma question ou mes questions en anglais. You have talked about a common sense approach to social media. When we talk about return to work, it's clear that these people are not commenting as citizens on public policy measures that the public service may have to impartially implement. They're employees commenting on their working conditions. Do you want to address the extent to which your common sense approach may or may not make a distinction on that basis?
Yes, thank you for your question. So just so I make sure that I understand, it's about the differentiation between employees posting online versus an anonymous post. Employees
No,
being
it's a distinction between like a Fraser, for
right?
example, who didn't like the metric system, but he wasn't an employee, challenging a policy, as opposed to an employee of the government of Canada who's saying, like, I'm an employee and I think there are rats in my building, or whatever. Would your approach, should it draw distinctions between what they're commenting on and the capacity in which they comment?
Mhm. Thank you for that question. So as the implementation team, we find that the current ESDC like code of conduct and the ethics generally are quite satisfactory with what's acceptable and what's unacceptable. We also find that the requirement of neutrality and nonpartisanship and impartiality are made fairly reasonable and excessively made obvious during the hiring process to become a public servant in the government of Canada. So we feel that it's on that sense it's satisfactory. In terms of dealing with engagement, which is the only real amendment that we're proposing, we are saying that not only should employees not be posting negatively or in a way that undermines their managers, their department, or their department's policies or government policies, we're also saying that any engagement with those posts is also unacceptable. So of course, an easy argument could be that this does go against the Fraser case ruling, but we find that impartiality and neutrality, especially with an upcoming election and a world of increasingly ideological extremism, is extremely important right now and needs to be reinforced currently.
Thank you.
Nancy, over to you.
Thanks so much. So again, thank you so much for your time and effort and this suite of recommendations and information. If I can, I'm interested in giving you the opportunity to go a little bit deeper, and I'm looking at your slide. I think this is slide 10 around implementation, and so these two directives that are at issue here. One on the prohibition around social media, the other one around returning to the office. I appreciate you've cast an implementation timeline, and I'm just wanting to open the floor for you as a team to maybe crack the lid on some of the analysis that you may have done about the interaction between these two things, the perception that employees will have that, they're really being told on the social media side of things what not to do, and simultaneously being told they got to get back to work. So just wanting to understand really how you were thinking through that interaction and the nexus between these two directives.
Of course, I think I can start. I don't know if Alex will maybe speak later about implementation specifically, but for us at ESTC, the relationship between RTO and social media is very much interlinked. For us, our main priority is service delivery. So in terms of RTO, the idea is a phased rollout, but of course, the employment and training advisors will need to be at the forefront of that return to office. In terms of social media, we really do feel that this is a common sense idea and that this is tacitly understood by most public servants, that it is not acceptable to go online and undermine government policies, your boss, your manager, that this is ultimately unacceptable, and that this will be reinforced by returning to the office. That this kind of re-education will be enhanced by going to the office, but that ultimately we feel that this is common sense and tacitly understood that that's unacceptable. And especially for ESDC, as we've mentioned, public perception is so important to our ability to deliver services when needed. So if the public is negatively viewing our department, our ministry, that's going to be a huge roadblock. I don't know if Alex wants to add anything or not.
Yeah, so if I can speak more to implementation, the reason we're looking at immediate implementation for updating the social media guidelines is if we're looking at the current situation based on our research and our examination, you have people posting at work, like on Reddit threads opening up, like return to office mandate. Is this insanity? Like, what is the government thinking? So actions such as these, language such as that undermines public trust in the integrity of the government, and is the government really capable? Like do the public servants that are working for the government themselves, do they even have confidence in what they're doing and what kinds of policies are being implemented? So that's something that we want to tackle immediately, which is why we're sort of beginning with those keyword highlights. We're looking at terminating access to certain social media sites while on the job to sort of put a damper in that immediately. And then the following month in March, we want to start to communicate the RTO timeline because people are still very nervous and anxious about what their life is going to look like. Like, how are they going to balance this with their family lives? Are they going to balance this with other commitments they have outside of the workplace? So we want to let them know when they're going to have to be in the office, to what capacity they're going to have to be in the office relatively quickly. And we want to be communicative to continue to uphold, that sort of faith in the public service system and continue to make sure public servants are able to adequately deliver services. So again, our main priority is service delivery. So that's why that was our main focus beginning with these 2 months.
I appreciate that so much. We all share that commitment in this department to public service ethics. Can I play the devil's advocate just with one short follow-up? Do you have any concern that employees will see this implementation plan and say, you're starting with stifling my social media access immediately before you tell me that I have to get back to the office?
Yeah,
It's definitely a risk. Oh yeah,
yeah,
so
I'll
you
let
can
Alex.
speak on. No,
Oh, okay.
you can speak on it. Yeah.
Okay, my apologies. I just say that is a very important interaction to note. For the implementation team, we were focused more on the fact that employees should also not be using social media at work. And as outlined in the context for the case, they were using websites like Reddit at work. And so that's a huge abuse of government property and government time, misappropriation of government time. And so, for us, that would be the messaging to the employees that, that this is really just about maintaining service delivery and an ethical workplace. So, respect, excellence as one of the values for ESDC, excellence means providing good work and also not abusing government devices. So that's kind of my take on the question. That's how we would frame it to the employees, although I will say that is a very interesting interaction to note. Yeah.
Yeah, I also just wanted to quickly add on to that. While it is true that, first of all, they shouldn't be using government working hours and government property to be on social media in the first place, I also wanted to add quickly that it's also in the ethics codes under communication networks that they can't be using personal social media to be publicly opposing government policies. And just like my colleague said, while it can be in some ways sort of turned around and interpreted as stifling, it is still part of their government contracts. So whether or not it's before
Okay, merci bien à tous pour votre présentation, but we must move on. We have one more presentation to deliver. Thank you so much for your advice. We'll take it all into great consideration.